Hi, Phantoms. I'm Jason.
And I'm Kyle. And
And
we're
we're
Only
Only
Phantoms. We're a small paranormal team from Central North Carolina.
Welcome to the Phantom Files, where we discuss all things paranormal.
And interview other investigators as well as read encounters with paranormal submitted by you, our listeners.
So sit back and let's get spooky.
Ooh.
All right. If you would, please introduce yourself. What's your name and the name of your paranormal team if you have one?
My name is Erin, and I am a one-person team. It is Hierophant Paranormal.
Awesome. Thank you. So, how did you start paranormal investigating? Like, when did you start? Was it years ago? Was it recent?
What was the spark?
I started, believe it or not, 25 years ago. And it was mostly because we had some incidences that happened in the house that I grew up in. And that's when I started developing a curiosity and interest in the paranormal and trying to figure out what exactly I was hearing and experiencing.
If you want, would you be willing to dive into that a little bit more? Like, what kind of things were you experiencing?
Well, I had a couple of weird incidences. I'm one of the people that saw the Hat Man as a kid. I also was in the second floor of my house with some friends, and we heard somebody run from one end of the attic to the other and back. And by the time it got back to the other end, me and all my friends were out on the front lawn. So,
Right.
and the other one that was always weird, and I've never been able to find an explanation for it. At some point towards maybe like the last 2 or 3 years that we were living in the house, I developed this terrible fear that the house was going to burn down via an electrical fire. And I was constantly feeling the walls to see if there were hot spots or if there was a fire starting. And once we left that house, I never had that issue again. I never had that fear after we left the house. And
All right,
I've never been able to find an explanation for that.
Okay, I was going to ask. I do have a couple questions here. And also a statement. All right, so hearing things running in the attic from one side of the house to the other, holy crap, anybody would be terrified. Recently, I've actually heard that myself, but I found out it was a raccoon. Awesome. It was a creature that was in our attic.
That is very
The attic, yeah, the attic in that house, 'cause we thought about that. The issue with that house, and I could show you on Google Earth, there were no trees or anything around. There was no way to get up there. And the attic was technically 3.5 floors up. So not sure what could have possibly gotten up there.
That's definitely a good distance. If you had any trees around it, then you would be able to have like possums and raccoons and other things. But if there were no trees around the house, then that'd definitely be a lot more difficult.
It was a densely populated area.
Now, I do have another question. You said more recently that you had this intense dread that your house was going to burn down. Was the house like old? Was it an old house? Because the one that I live in was built in the 50s and the late 50s. And sometimes I actually have that dread because of old wiring.
Yes. The house was built in 1922. And we left in 2003. We moved out in 2003, but it was built in 1922, so it's just over 100 years old now. And it did have, when we first bought the house, my parents actually had the house rewired, and that was in the 80s. But it had knob and tube wiring, but it didn't after they rewired it.
Okay. You said you've been investigating for 25 years, correct?
Yes.
In that time, what would you say would be one of your favorite locations to continue to go back to?
I am actually a big fan of going to cemeteries. And I know that that's a controversial thing to do, investigating in cemeteries, but for some reason I find that it's a lot more relaxed and you can get more of a bond with whoever it is that you're sitting down and talking to. Recently I was going to one in Greensboro, and I had visited the same tombstone 3 different times. And I didn't get a whole lot of evidence, but in one that I actually did catch on video, you can hear her singing in the background.
Oh, that's creepy.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Is that a little more common? Because that seems very particular. Someone singing, they've obviously very clearly had that a big part of their life. Besides the singing, have you ever heard anything else that was that clear and noticeable? Like maybe like a phrase or another type of sound, something along those lines. That's kind of common as you kind of if you get any of those hearings. If I'm making any sense.
I've never gotten a full phrase. I mostly get like grunts and things like that I can't really explain. I don't want to knock them, I don't want to say that it's paranormal because I don't know. But I get a lot of grunts and like strange sounds and things like that when I do voice recordings and all.
Gotcha. Interesting. So you would say that's one of the most clear direct sound you've had from that experience?
Yeah, I've had two that were very, very clear. That one was probably the spookiest because it sounded like an actual human being. Another one was a grunt that I heard. I was actually doing a Randonautica video, and I picked up this strange grunt, and I still go back to that on a regular basis and keep listening to it, trying to figure out what it was. And those were my two clearest.
Honestly, in the past few years, we haven't really done too much EVP work, but what we have done, we haven't really gotten anything, at least anything of note. Do you have any tips for trying to elicit reactions from spirits?
My best thing would be if you're going to do like a cemetery, what I like to do is I do the EVPs at the cemetery. And I go to a stone that I feel I'm being called to. And I try to do as much research about the person that I can find, and then you speak to them accordingly. The one I got where the woman was singing, her name was Selma Womble, and I believe she died sometime in the 1930s, and she was an African-American woman. And I spoke to her accordingly. I called her Miss Selma. I was as respectful as I possibly could. I tried to be as Southern as I possibly could, while also trying to speak to her as an equal, because I understood at that point that if her spirit was there, myself being white, she was probably not looking very kindly on me, considering the time period that she was alive in the United States. I had to take that into consideration, and I spoke to her accordingly. And I also honored her wishes when I asked her the question if she would like me to come back and visit a fourth time. She said no. And I promised her I wouldn't come back, and I didn't. I never went back to her stone. I never went back to the cemetery at all. And I feel that that's probably why she gave me what little she did.
That's definitely understandable. I know we can relate with that, with just the honesty and the respectfulness that you put forth. That is something that we are also trying to emulate as well in our investigations, just to make sure that if we are talking to spirits, that they do feel we're genuine,
comfortable. Yeah. It's when you're getting into the unknown, you really gotta. I mean, especially if you feel like there's a human presence behind it, you really should show some level of courtesy. I think that goes a long way. I mean, we don't. Again, it's all unknown. So if it ends up being something, with the possibility of it being very negative, I definitely feel like you should probably give it the best impression that you could.
Absolutely.
The least reason to mess with you.
Exactly. I always cringe when I hear people, like, they go into a location, whatever location it is, and they immediately go in very aggressive and accusing them of being demons or whatever. That's not the way to approach it. You've got to approach it as if there's an actual person behind this spirit, because most of the time there is.
So that actually leads into another question I had, is what do you think of YouTube videos now and their common use of either the name demon or skinwalker in the title just to grab some clicks?
I hate it so much. Oh my god. It's just like you said, that's all it is for, is collecting views. They want people to come in and watch, and they want to retain people. So every time they go to a location, there's a demon or a skinwalker. And I'm particularly especially with the skinwalkers, because I somewhat feel like that's cultural appropriation. It's a deeply held belief by the Native American population, and even really speaking the name of it is offensive to them because that's supposed to call the creature. And we all do it on a regular basis, and we probably shouldn't. We should probably respect their beliefs. And it's the same with the demons. The demons are a Christian construct, just like, the Muslims have jinns and things like that. It was constructed just to pull in views, and that's what's kept the guys on TV as well. And I think most of them are just trying to emulate the guys on TV.
I can definitely agree with that. I know Kyle and I, we started watching a couple different groups on YouTube, and we started seeing how respectful they were to begin with. But then every thumbnail that they put out and every title they put out had either Skinwalker or Demon. Every last one.
Yeah, the clickbait game, like it's almost just like everything else in life. Like you hate the game, but it works for a reason. Us humans are interesting creatures. We gravitate towards it. So I understand why they do it, but I also 100% agree. Yeah, that's.
I think I think it creates a pretty bad spiral, though, because if you do get some kind of footage, especially if you're using clickbait to draw people in, if you do get some kind of evidence, your viewers are going to expect to see evidence in every single video. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't get evidence at every single location. But a lot of these YouTubers seem to be getting tons and tons of evidence at every single location. And it kind of kills the whole process.
Exactly, and I can agree with you on that. Like, me and a few others from our group, we recently visited Trevette Clinic last month, and we got nothing. Zip, zero, zilch. Nothing. We spent 8-9 hours there. We were supposed to go all the way until like 11:30 the next morning, but we were exhausted. So we drove home. We didn't stay there. It's nothing against the place. It's just we didn't bring cots. We didn't bring sleeping bags. We were told, we can't really sleep on the grounds, but we can take a nap if we want. Which nothing against that, but still, we didn't get any evidence. We were tired and we wanted to go home.
It's definitely a lot, very very glorified in the TV space for sure. One of the big, I try and tell anyone that comes along with us, if it's their first time, like, hey, prepare for disappointment, because you're probably going to be spending 8 hours, and you get something that you could if you look hard enough, maybe there's something, or if you listen hard enough, you can convince yourself, but chances are you're not going to find anything. So there is that expectation out there, and I'll just throw that out there to anyone listening in. Like that is the cold hard reality of it.
It really is.
Yeah.
You can spend hours, you can spend weeks at different locations and still not get anything. And what you'll see is
you do, you can't use it.
Yeah, and what you'll see is a lot of the ones on TV, which I hate saying this, no offense to them, but a lot of the ones that you see on TV, they actually have a pre-production crew and a post-production crew. The pre-production crew goes and finds a location, sets up the best angles, and they come in, they shoot for 6 hours and leave. They don't really do any actual investigating. They don't do any research. There is one exception that I've noticed, and that is with Ghost Hunters, the original team. They would do research after the fact to figure out if there was anything that corresponded to the experiences they were having. I hate going to a location with that kind of stuff front loaded in all of my team members' minds, because then they will expect that thing to happen to them.
That's a very valid point.
That's kind of why when we went to Trevette Clinic, I didn't tell Amanda that there's apparently a spirit in the basement that likes to goose a woman.
It's such a funny
it's a nice way to say it to me. Like, I don't want to be offensive, but you...
Grabby, handsy.
Yes, handsy, being handsy. There you go, that's better.
Little handsy.
Yeah.
I've had it happen.
But again, that experience didn't happen. I didn't tell her until after the fact. And she's like, oh, yeah, nothing happened. I was like, yeah, kind of figured.
And the power of suggestion is
Yeah.
incredible.
It really is.
Yeah,
So,
especially with these apps and everything that everybody's using. Any word that comes through, you can find some way to associate it and make it valid.
You said it.
definitely. We do have a member on our team who likes to use different apps through a portal device that he built. And don't get me wrong, some of it seems legit. Like, I and the rest of my team have heard my name called out multiple times at different locations. But on the other hand, a lot of it is garbled, there's reverb, and people are trying to assign words to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
And the obelisk is just as bad. You've got the obelisk and these apps that act like the obelisk. They can say blue and they'll come out and say, oh, well, this room 20 years ago was painted blue, so it's obviously referencing this room. You can always find some way to make it valid.
yeah, and that was the term for that.
The power of suggestion is the only thing I
Well,
can
no, there's an actual term for it.
pareidolia?
No. Basically using the evidence to corroborate what you're doing instead of trying to.
Confirmation bias.
Yes, that's it. Confirmation
yeah.
bias.
Fair enough.
That is very much confirmation bias because you're making it out of nothing.
Yeah.
To support your beliefs or whatever you're trying to do.
Yep. Exactly.
So, Kyle actually brought up a term, pareidolia. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's quite common.
I was going to say, let me explain what that is to any viewers who have or listeners who have not heard of this term. Pareidolia is basically when you look at the clouds and you can see a face in the clouds or a shape in the clouds, or if you look at a bunch of trees and leaves and you can see a shape in the leaves that resembles something that is common to you. It can also be done with digital media. It can be done in photos of any kind, dating back years and years and years, whatever.
It essentially is confirmation bias on that point. If you suggest to yourself that you're like we say, some of these new investigators, if they think that something is going to happen and they see anything that looks similar to it, they're going to jump to that conclusion versus logical. That's kind of how I explain it.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on that tangent. But go ahead and explain what you were saying.
Well, I think it's fairly common, and I see a lot of photographs, and I have various social media, and people have tagged me in photos or directly sent them to me. And a lot of times, the most recent one I saw, somebody had taken a picture in the woods, and there was a clearing, and they took the picture down the clearing to a tree line in the back. And they insisted that there was something in the tree line. And I asked them, I said, what is it that you see? Because I can't see it. And they told me there was a shadow person. And I enlarged that thing and everything, and I couldn't find it. So they finally sent me another one where it was circled. And it was a tree trunk.
Oh, I was going to say, well, couldn't it have just been a normal shadow? A pixelated shadow that ends up being the shape of a human because of the shape of the tree?
Yeah,
People jump to
it could have
conclusion.
been. It to me it looked like it was just a tree trunk in between two other tree trunks, but it was a little darker than the other ones.
Yeah, I'm a big tech guy. We also have we actually have one of our other members actually works in digital forensics, so he is completely trained in analyzing photos, compression techniques. He does that for a living. So yeah, it's so, and especially with anything digital, it's so very easy because you have to think, obviously, most people zoom in on a digital camera on their phone, which automatically blows up pixels that are already pretty small, and then they're also sending it through social media that is compressed. When you get it, it's extra compressed, so you're essentially seeing an already doctored up image, and a lot of people tend to forget that, and I understand it. We kind of see a camera as a camera, but it almost has created its own little epidemic of pareidolia just from just being able to take a picture of anything. It really gets that confirmation bias in if you're not really comfortable with what it looks like.
Yeah, then it just makes you feel uneasy, and there you go.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many issues with leaves because so many pictures that I see are like, oh, I'm seeing a something up in a tree, and you look at it and you're looking and you're looking and there's nothing there, but they absolutely insist that there's something there. And it's pareidolia, and they don't want to hear it. Most people don't want to hear it because it's like, no, I see it, it's there. So
All right, so this is going to lead into another question, but yeah, stemming from that, we will come back to this question in just a couple minutes. But do you believe in mediums and psychics and the abilities that they claim they possess?
oh, I don't know. I sort of do. I believe that people can be sensitive to energies. I'm not sure how much, like apparently somebody in my family was a psychic, and my mother was telling me the woman told her she was going to die in a week, and she wanted to tell her all this stuff before she died, and the woman actually did die the week after. But she told my mom all this stuff that actually came true. So I think about that and I'm like, I guess it could be real, but at the same time, I didn't witness it, so I don't know if it was exaggerated or what the story was. I think, but I think people can sense energies. I think they can feel things, but I'm not sure to what extent, if that makes any sense at all.
That actually makes a lot of sense to me. Personally, I believe that there have been studies throughout time, throughout at least the time that the United States has been a country, where we have studied psychics, mediums, and things of that sort. Namely, what was the project that was Men Who Stare at Goats is based off of?
I just remember the movie.
MK Ultra?
Was that no? MK Ultra was the LSD thing, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, but not too far.
Yeah, I accidentally.
You're fine.
But yeah, so the reason this ties back into the other question is: have you ever encountered a group or a team or an individual who claims to be a psychic or a medium, and then goes, "Well, I know exactly what's in this photo because I talked to it," or I feel this, therefore, it's basically the same thing you were just saying, how the more adamantly you try and tell them, no, it's most likely pareidolia, they more adamantly defend it as, no, I'm a psychic, so I know.
All the time. I have put images up, especially at Facebook. I have put images up where there was absolutely nothing in there, and I knew there was nothing in there. Actually, most recently, I put up a picture of this old doll that I have. And, I just posted a picture, and somebody came in and told me they were psychic and told me about, the original owner died when she was 7, and, her soul is possessing the doll, and she went into this whole thing. And I came back to her and I said, the original owner of the doll is my mother.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, I was like, my mother is alive and well. She's sitting in the living room, a couple feet away. And she's in her 70s. So you're incorrect. And she fought with me about it. She argued with me that I was wrong, that my mother must have gotten the doll secondhand. And I said she did not.
Wow.
It was, and the doll could be traced back because it's a well-known doll called Tiny Tear. And she's traceable. She's a common doll. She's traceable. You can find out when she was made, and everything lines up with how old my mother is.
So, speaking of dolls, we went to a location. I'm not going to say the name of it currently, but we went to a location that had several dolls that they claimed were haunted, including a Raggedy Ann doll, which Raggedy Ann is the original...
Annabelle.
Annabelle, thank you. From like the Conjuring house. Do you believe, since we're talking about dolls, do you believe that dolls and other items can actually be possessed by a spirit or possibly cursed in some way?
I believe that spirits can possess items. I really do. But I think right now the haunted doll thing is the flavor of the month. So when somebody presents me a doll and says it's haunted, I am most likely to very highly doubt them. But do I believe it's possible? Yes, I do believe it can happen.
So that leads me into the next question. A lot of this is going to be possibly about haunted objects or locations. What are your thoughts on the craze right now of Dybbuk boxes?
Oh boy.
They're not real. They're so not real.
Agreed.
The guy,
yes.
well, the guy that made the first Dybbuk box, the one that's over in a certain guy's museum, he even came out and said he made the whole thing up.
So it was a guy who made it. Yeah, he created it, and then he basically was like, "You guys know this is all fake, right? Like, I literally was just trying to make some money."
Yeah. And it's still in a museum somewhere that I won't mention, being pushed as being an actual haunted object, and it's being pushed as if the story is true when it's very publicly been admitted that it is not in fact true. And I don't think once that story came out, you started to see all these Dybbuk boxes. I don't remember ever seeing a Dybbuk box before that.
Speaking of Dybbuk boxes, the reason I brought that up is because the same location, same proprietor of that location has a Dybbuk box, has it on display, and I talked to the proprietor about it. I'm like, you do understand that they're fake, right? And the proprietor goes, well, I don't really believe that. I'm like, but the guy literally came out, the guy who made it came out, admitted he made it, admitted to trying to create a hoax just to make money. And he's still, the person still, stood by it 100%. It's haunted. I'm like, okay, I won't pressure you anymore about it.
I can play devil's advocate, however. As far as the Dybbuk boxes are concerned, while I haven't heard of that specific thing, the Dybbuk box, early witchcraft used to do that kind of thing. They used to put certain things in bottles and jars and boxes and bury them places and stuff like that. That doesn't mean any of that stuff was haunted, but it was a belief in witchcraft that, doing these certain things would curse a household or would bring protection to a household or whatever the case may be. People have found jars buried under their houses that were full of, I want to say railroad ties and urine, things like that. And that kind of thing is well known. People find that kind of stuff all the time. It's usually very, very old. And I think the Dybbuk box idea could be branching off of something like that, because you still have people in modern day who are practicing witchcraft. Do they still bury things under their houses and stuff like that? I don't know.
I can say,
based on something like that.
Well, I can say with some certainty that there are different Wiccan or pagan beliefs that do still bury things, and they still collect moon water, and they still, follow different
Mm-hmm.
spirits and beliefs like that as well. Nothing against them at all. Or their beliefs. Like, honestly, to me, believe what you want. We're here just to find the truth.
It's a wacky world we live in. Who's to say that's not the real way?
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody knows for sure.
Exactly. And we actually, on our team, we have a he calls himself the Wish.com shaman.
That's his exact words.
Nice.
Those are his exact words. And those are his exact words from when we went to said location that had the Dybbuk box. But he calls himself the Wish.com shaman. And he goes with us on different investigations every once in a while. And, he still practices the native beliefs.
Okay. And I mean, I still do tarot cards and stuff like that. I have crystals, and I have to admit, I don't believe my crystals are going to make me smarter or make me live longer or anything like that. I just think they're shiny rocks. But, I do have my shiny rocks, and I have my tarot cards and pendulums and things like that. So, I mean, I can't completely discount any of it.
There's nothing wrong with a good MacGuffin.
Nothing wrong with that. Until you start believing those crystals can change the weather.
No, they're shiny rocks. They're very pretty, though.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
You have any
no, I
questions?
just don't. Go ahead.
I was asking Kyle if he had any questions because I'm basically out of the ones that I had prepared. We've blown through them, and I was going to ask, so when you personally go on investigations, do you carry any number of tools with you, any number of items to help you detect specific things? If so, what do you like carrying with you?
What's
your favorite?
What's in that utility belt?
Well, I mean, I like to carry my equipment. I have my voice recorder. I have my K2 meter. Occasionally, I bring my SB7 spirit box. I do have the apps. I've attempted them. I still don't know how I feel about these apps, but I give them a try when I go out. And I like to bring trigger objects if I know of an object that would be triggering. Like if I was going to go, you had mentioned the USS North Carolina earlier. If I was going to do an investigation there, I would bring pictures of pinups and unfiltered cigarettes.
That
Because
is
something
a
like that would be a
fantastic
trigger
idea for
object.
next time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean these were soldiers, and I had the absolute honor one time. I took a tour of the USS North Carolina. I did a walking tour, and I had a gentleman that was going down the steps in front of me, and he fell, and I caught him before he went all the way down. When we got down to the bottom of the steps and everything, come to find out he had actually served on the ship.
Oh wow!
And yeah, I got the absolute most fantastic tour of that ship I have ever gotten in my life, or I could have ever possibly asked for. So I would use some of the things that he was telling me, and pinup girls and unfiltered cigarettes are two of the things that he mentioned. So I would bring those along on an investigation.
That is smart. That's knowing your location, know your clientele. I mean, in general terms, but that is awesome.
Yeah.
I hadn't necessarily thought about that.
I haven't thought about that either.
Sweet. We
Yeah.
appreciate that. I'm totally
And-
writing that down. Thank you.
Yeah. You know, and go to you can go to Amazon as well, and you can get sound effects and things like that. And if you're going to some place where there was reportedly a train wreck, use train sounds. You can do the same thing with car wrecks. Use car sounds. If the place you're at was originally a farm, sounds of farm animals.
So our team, we usually go to a location close to you called the Devil's Tramping Ground. We go there.
Mhm.
We go there pretty often. The last time we went was actually the last time you were there. We went, and Kyle's like, "Hey, why don't you break out your whistle?" And I have a 3D printed Aztec death whistle.
Is absolutely terrifying. I
The-
hate it.
I love
The
it.
first night we were there, Kyle wanted to record a video for TikTok, Instagram, wherever we were going to throw it up at. And he's like, "Why don't you just blow into the whistle?" I'm like, "All right." So we did. And that is the most terrifying sound you will hear, bar none. If you're going to a place that was possibly a battlefield, or possibly there was a lot of torment, much like a asylum, I would take that. I don't necessarily know if I would actually use that at the asylum,
Probably not.
but probably the battlefield.
Yeah, definitely Battlefield.
Yeah, I don't think I would use that at the asylum. I think I would creep everybody out to no extent they want to go home.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to the Devil's Tramping Ground?
I have been once, and I actually looked it up before I joined you guys. It was 3 years ago that I was there, and I was not there for too long.
That's actually one of our favorite places to go.
I would love to go back, but I went by myself, and it was the summertime, and unfortunately, I had recently had surgery on my leg, so I couldn't stay long, even if I had wanted to. But when I went there, I had a couple of those experiences where you can't really prove it to anybody else. And I did catch an EVP, but I don't highlight it as much because you have to have a really good set of headphones to hear it. And I can pick it up in one set of my headphones, but my other set of headphones, I can't hear it. So I don't spend too much time listening to it.
So on one of our first trips there, I think it was our second or third trip there, I had a very similar experience, and it's something that I cannot prove. For the life of me, I cannot prove it. We had actually followed one of the trails as far back as we could, and we came to a clearing, basically where they had put up power lines, the giant, the massive tower power line things. And we turn around and we're walking away, and
I remember now.
and I swear I felt like a tap on my shoulder and this girl whisper in my ear. I don't remember what she said, but that's all I heard and felt. It was like a little tap on my shoulder and a whisper in my ear. Can't prove it.
I bet you it was the same trail. I bet it was the same trail that I got my EVP on. Because I went down when you first go in, it's the trail that goes to the left. And I didn't make it all the way down it because of my leg. But I hit a real icy cold spot. And when I got home, about there was where the EVP was.
So the first time we went, my brother went down the right trail, and he got to a certain point and he felt like he was ice cold and he was pouring sweat, and he was actually using my divining rods at the time just to see if they would cross at any point along the path, because the myth or the legend is that the devil rises at midnight or whenever in the middle of the night, walks down one trail, starts pacing around in a circle, and then by dawn he goes down the opposite trail and leaves. So I don't know if maybe my brother stumbled upon something. I don't know.
Yeah,
but,
that sounds similar to what I had.
But
I just remember that one spot, it was boiling hot that day, and I was soaking wet. And that one spot, and I remember because I stopped, just because it felt so good. But that's about where I picked up the EVP.
So one thing we do have to say is that, people have to be mindful of their environment at all times. Temperatures, humidity, everything. Because the last few times that we've went, it's either been early spring or it's been early to middle spring or early fall. And here in North Carolina, it's still blazing hot at those times.
Yes.
Like all the way to, September,
December,
October, December, January.
Oh, God, yeah.
But, you have to be mindful of your environment, the environment you're going into. You have to dress appropriately, make sure you're hydrated, all these things, because they can all have an effect on you.
Yeah.
I have a question now based on that. Do you believe, or would you theorize that going to some of these locations, with it being hot, humid, possibly cramped, darker when it gets at night, yes, all these things can affect you, but do you believe that can actually have a psychosomatic effect on you to where you start having delusions or hallucinations that you're hearing things, you're seeing things, etc.?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I've wanted to go back to the Devil's Tramping Grounds because right as I was getting ready to leave, actually what pushed me to leave was I felt like I was being surrounded. And I just had this feeling that, like hundreds of people were going to come up through the bushes and they were surrounding me. And I decided to leave at that point. And I never wrote that off as paranormal because at that point I had been there 2 or 3 hours, I think. And it was so hot. And I thought that could just be the heat. I could have just been dehydrating. I could have just been very hot. And I may have just been feeling things because my body was off. So yeah, it's definitely possible.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. And I can actually add on to that. One of the last times that Kyle here went with us, we also had someone else that went with us that later we realized probably should not have gone. While there, this person had a slight freak out in the middle of the woods and wanted to return to the campfire, which was fine, but was afraid to go by themselves, so I went with them. And once we got back around the campfire, everything was fine. And then they started freaking out again, thinking that there were lots of things coming at her, which at the time, our campfire was maybe 20, 30 feet from the circle itself.
Not far, yeah.
But this person, believed highly that something was coming out of the woods at them, and got to the point where she was so hysterical that they made me believe that as well. I'm like, hold on, there's nothing here. Chill out.
Power suggestion is pretty strong, and forests are really
Creepy. They can be pretty creepy at night.
Just straight up, yeah. Because there's so much. There's the two polar opposites. There's the, any bit of wind rustles everything and can trick you into hearing anything that you suggest to yourself, as well as when it gets incredibly quiet, like that one moment where we found where everything just stopped.
Yeah.
That can also come off as incredibly unsettling, considering how much life is in the forest. So that's why so many horror movies have been set inside of woods.
Oh yes.
Not only that, but
Yeah. My favorite cryptid is Mothman, but I don't believe Mothman is real. I'm fascinated by cryptids. I love the stories behind them. I like the lore. But I personally, I don't believe any of them exist. I believe Mothman was an owl. Just from the research that I had done on it and everything, it sounds to me like it was a very large owl. And for people who haven't seen owls, owls can become enormous. And when they're flying over you, especially at night, it could look like a cryptid. Especially if there's headlights in their eyes, you could say their eyes are glowing and things like that. So I don't believe in cryptids, but I will be completely honest with you. I'm open to the idea because, going back to the Skinwalker, it's such a deeply held belief with the Native Americans, and I'm kind of sitting here thinking to myself, could it be? I mean, that could exist. If that many generations of people are that afraid of it, it could be real.
And I can agree with that too. Honestly, with where we are in the United States, the Appalachian Mountains is some of the most ancient mountains in the world. They are older than bones, as scientists will say. They are older than bones themselves. So is it possible that there's something in these woods, in these hills and hollers and caves that we just haven't discovered yet? There's stuff in the ocean that we're discovering all the time.
Oh god, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I have said that because I'm one of these people. I absolutely refuse to kid around about the Bigfoot hunters and stuff, because while I don't believe in Bigfoot, at the end of the day, I don't know for sure. And you've got areas on land, places in Alaska and Canada and Siberia and things like that, which we have no idea what's out there. I mean, I don't think Bigfoot's sitting in my backyard right now, but maybe there is something somewhere up in Alaska or, Siberia or something.
Yeah, there's so many different possibilities for that. So yeah, it absolutely can. Also, too, with the recent discovery that aliens are probably real and they're here, who knows? There could have been some interference with that, causing some of that as well. One thing you had mentioned when we first started talking, you had mentioned a Hat Man. Can you go into that a little more detail?
Yeah, Hat Man is one of my favorite shadow people, and I used to see him when I was a kid, and that's when most people seem to see him. I always saw him in the same spot. He would be down in our basement, and he never approached me or anything like that, and I was never afraid of him. I actually kind of get a little weirded out when people tell me how afraid they are of Hat Man, because I kept repeatedly seeing him for years. Sometimes I'd go down there and he'd be there, sometimes he wouldn't be. And I never felt fear from him. But again, I don't know what to make of it, because I was probably between the ages of about, I would say 6 and 11. And, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm sure I saw this thing, but am I absolutely sure that I saw this thing just because of the age, you know?
Definitely, gotcha. Yeah, we both know some people that have had dealings with shadow figures in the past and shadow people. The Shadow Man, our friends, I'll mention later, but yeah, we've definitely heard of that. So I haven't heard too much about it. You kind of mentioned that is there kind of like many different kind of like very common shadow people like the Hat Man? I'm honestly genuinely curious because I haven't done any research on it. So are there a couple of other like prominent figures that people see that tend to show up more often?
Well, as far as the shadow people, I haven't heard of any others other than the Hat Man. But Hat Man has showed up, you know, all over the world. There's been sightings of him, and the stories always vary a little bit. Some people say he's got glowing eyes. Some people say he doesn't. Now, when the sightings that I had when I was a kid, he did not have glowing eyes. But there's a lot of people that say he's got glowing white eyes. He's got glowing red eyes. Some people have said that they've woken up and they've had sleep paralysis and he's been standing over them. Other people said they just sort of passed him somewhere in the house at points. But it seems to be that he comes to mostly children. And it also seems to be that if there's some kind of trauma in the child's life, the child is more likely to see Hat Man. And that's there's been debate as to whether or not he could be the cause of the strife or if he's there as a comfort to the child. As far as other prominent shadow figures, I haven't heard of one quite as prominent as that. Usually the shadow figures that I have heard about seem to be, a lot of people will see them, but always at the same location. Like, there'll be a haunted location, an asylum, say, and you can have 17 different teams have gone in there and they've all seen this particular shadow person. But Hat Man has been seen all over the world.
Definitely interesting.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
He's worth the research.
Word. We'll dig into that a little bit more, probably on stream.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of that, first of all, we want to absolutely thank you for your time. We are about to wrap up here. So we want to thank you so much for being on here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Aaron.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
So to our followers, if you want, go check her out. She is at Hierophant Paranormal. She has a YouTube channel, Instagram,
we'll make
TikTok.
sure to put all of the all of that underneath there.
We'll get all the links from you.
Definitely.
Okay, I'll send you all my links.
Awesome. So we'll have that link below. So once again, Rolling Phantoms, a Hierophant Paranormal, thank you so much. We'll be ending this here.